Hi, everyone. Welcome to Evolve with Maida. Today we have a new guest on our show, and this is Shannon Dobs. Welcome, Shannon.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I mean, it's an honor to have you here, a veteran of the United States. And also, you're working in, I was trying to read your bio, and I thought it was so beautiful because you were talking about resilience, and then you were talking about owning businesses, and then all of a sudden, from owning businesses, you went into a whole other direction
Mhm.
to work with um, basically transforming food waste into agriculture gold. Uh, and in that way, if I understood it correctly, and you can correct me, to in a way fix the climate change as well.
It's kind of shaping up that way, yeah, but it definitely didn't start off like this. I was running
Mm-hmm.
nightclubs up in northern Nevada in the United States for many
Mm-hmm.
years, and this was a dream of mine since I'd been in the Army. I wanted to get involved with the nightclub industry and I wanted to learn all about it. And so after I got out of the service, I moved to Las Vegas, spent 7 years just crawling through the back doors of different areas, met a lot of friends who were artists, and really just got involved with the scene.
Wow.
And then I ended up moving to Northern Nevada to take over my own bar. And over 11 years, I turned it into the number one dance club in Northern Nevada. So we were beating out casinos, and everybody just thought we were the best place ever. And in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
I ended up selling that bar to another investor couple that was looking for a turnkey solution. They wanted to kind of invest in a community and really kind of do the same things that I had been doing for the last decade. And so when I handed that over, I ended up handing over a community LGBT resource that had been
Mm-hmm.
operating for longer than I'd been alive. And
Okay.
what was crazy about it is that during that decade, I got to know everybody intimately. We were all friends, and I started seeing my staff, my customers, all of my friends were dying of preventable food-related diseases because they were living in a
Oh.
food desert, because they didn't have access to healthy food, and most of them didn't have a vehicle, so they couldn't get to the grocery stores that were on the outskirts of the city. And so it was a
Mm-hmm.
situation where, as a business owner, I started looking at how can I get involved and start making a difference. And it started off with me creating a commercial kitchen in my bar so that my staff and my customers would have access late night to healthy food options.
Mm-hmm.
But it quickly became apparent that that was not going to be enough, and so I ended up getting involved with a program to try and get a grocery store into downtown Reno, which was the area's largest food desert. It was also where all of the public transportation coalesced in the hub downtown. And so if we were able to get a grocery store into that area, it would fix a lot of the food insecurity issues for the entire region. And so we started working on that. I found out that the nonprofits weren't interested in getting involved, and so I started my own nonprofit in
Wow.
2016. And so that was even while I was still running the bar. I was running this nonprofit organization, and so after I sold it, I pretty much transitioned into a volunteer advocacy role that I'd already kind of taken on as a founder, and I moved into that and really started getting that. But then, we worked for 4 years trying to get a grocery store in place, and in 2019, we actually had one halfway built. We got a lease signed with a local business owner, a property owner, to take out 1,000 square feet, which is approximately 300 meters of space, and build
Mm-hmm.
out a small community grocery store. And then we had our office down in the basement. And 4 months into the build, the property owner kicked us out of the building, changed the locks on us, and took all of the equipment that we'd had donated, and just basically
Oh my God.
wouldn't let any of our volunteers on site. They had gotten a huge
But you guys rented the building?
Yeah, we had a lease on the building for 5 years as an incubator project, but they got a lot of community pressure on the back end from retailers and nonprofits, surprisingly enough. That
And they can just do
Yeah,
that? They can kick you out like that?
well, I mean, we didn't have funds to fight them in court or to do any of that stuff, so we just were like
Oh
free
my
to do it at that
God.
point. And so that experience really gave me a better understanding about what we're kind of facing in the food system. Is that it's not
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us make the assumption that everything that we're trying to do is unopposed, but the reality is that in a lot of situations, existing industries really depend on the status quo for their profits, for their projections, and even for like donor interest and relevancy in our community. And unfortunately, our food bank system here in the United States is one of those entities. And so we got a lot of pushback because some of the leadership was seeing a competitive threat in what we're doing
Mm.
of providing food access. And what one of the things that I was doing was trying to teach nonprofits how to develop a grocery store in parallel with the food pantries. And so I was showing.
But you did say that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you did say that the people were not able to get to a grocery store because they were living in the desert, if I understood correctly.
So I should define that term. So the United States Department of Agriculture defines a food desert as an area that is more than in an urban area, it's more than a mile away from the nearest grocery store where healthy food is at.
Oh,
And a
okay.
large proportion of people in that area don't have their own form of transportation. So in areas, so you guys in Sweden, you guys aren't used to this, but like I grew up in New Mexico, and New Mexico is about the size of like 5 or 6 European countries.
Wow.
And we only have one or two major cities, and then everything else, the whole rest of the state is
It's like
it's
rural.
all rural and it's all farmland. It's all
Yeah.
hard to get to, and sometimes you have to drive an hour or an hour and a half to get to the nearest store, and it's crazy.
Oh my God. So how do you guys get your food? Do you like buy stacks of food and then just
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah, we all go to Costco. My dad lives out in one of those areas where it was a long, long way, and so he would once a month we would get in the pickup truck and would drive 45 minutes into town, and we'd stock up on whatever you needed for the month, and you'd bring back, and you'd have a lot of pantry supplies and a lot of dry goods, and maybe you have a freezer in the garage, so you put whatever you got to put in there, and yeah, you have to plan ahead, and if you happen to be out in that area and you don't have a car, if your car breaks down, man,
Oh my
you're
God.
begging friends
That
for.
sounds so hard because that that sounds so impossible because I just imagine sometimes, or one time me and my husband, we actually bought food for, let's say, like a week, and we bought a lot of food. Most of the food we didn't use because we didn't have the time to. I mean, cooking for two people is very hard
Yeah,
because you never know the like right amount of food you need. But we were like, we need to be economical and just buy a lot of food for a whole week, and then the food, I feel embarrassed saying this, but the food ended up getting mold because
yeah,
we, I mean, so I just imagine, what about the vegetables? I mean, they do go bad really quick.
they can, but so one of the things that I did when I was running my nonprofit organization was we were teaching people how to use, you know what an instant pot is? An instant pot,
An instant pot, is it
like a pressure cooker that you plug into the wall.
like a, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, I know, I know.
so for people who don't have a functional kitchen at home, so a lot of the situation also is some people they live in a converted motel or they live in somebody's basement or in a garage or some random place. A lot of people kind of exist in the margins of society. And if they don't have a
Yeah.
functional kitchen to be able to cook at home with, like they could go to a food pantry and they could get a box of food, but then they get home and they have nothing to cook it with. And so we have this kind of rings and cycles of different barriers that you have to address
Yeah.
dealing with this polycrisis situation. And the instant pot, and this is for you and your husband too. It's such a perfect situation. Because
Mm,
for $60, you put this on the counter, you plug it in. It's a wet cooking environment, so you can take dry food, dry vegetables,
mhm.
spices, herbs. You could take in and add that to your meats, your vegetables, anything that you find, and you can cook it all down using this wet environment. It'll rehydrate the food at the same time that it cooks it. And so,
I used to call that instant pot that you called it. I didn't know the name in English, so I used to call it boiler.
yeah, yeah, it's a boiler. But the brand Instant Pot, they came out in 2010 and they revolutionized boilers because what they did, yeah,
Okay.
for the first time in history,
So I can call it a boiler. It wasn't
a
wrong.
boiler, yeah, that's fine. It's just a plug-in boiler that's got safety mechanisms so it won't explode.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah,
damn, I've been calling it a boiler my whole life.
no, it's perfect. It's perfect. The thing, yeah, the big technological revolution was this company figured out how to put safeties on, so that because we've always had
Mm,
boilers, you put it on the stove, and then if you leave and go in the other room to do your wash, all of a sudden you hear a loud boom and there's a hole in your ceiling.
yeah.
So so that's kind of scary. And this company basically figured out a way around that to where it doesn't ever happen, and so you can walk away and you don't have to worry about what's going to happen.
Well, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But it's the way you're explaining about these people that live in these rural areas sounds also like they have a really bad, like, I don't know, locations issue. And I was thinking like maybe transportation could be better if they had, I don't know, do they have a lot of buses there or no? No, not at all.
The sheer size of the area we live in, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, California, all of these areas, there's so much space that, yeah, we
Mm,
have bus systems, but that, it's not great. Sometimes it'll take an
mm,
hour, 2 hours or more to get home from work. And if you have to divert over to this different area to get groceries and then go home, I mean, you'll never see your kids. So it's a
oh my gosh.
pretty
Okay.
ugly situation. And then
Okay.
imagine on top of that, if you've got a disability, if you have your kids with you, let's say you're trying to juggle a walker and something to carry your groceries with. So, and then you get on the bus and the bus driver's mean to you and says, "Oh, you can't have all that stuff." And so there's kinds
Yes.
of just societal challenges with it. But the biggest problem here in the United States that it's hard to translate for Europeans because I've been to Italy, I've been to Germany, I've been to a bunch of different places around Europe, Ireland. Everywhere you go, you have these small community markets that are in
Hmm.
every neighborhood, and so there's never been a problem getting to food. But here in the United States, we invented a model called the supermarket back in the 1930s
Yes.
because that model became the dominant strategy for the United States, every other type of store that we try and put into place ends up failing. And so we don't have that small market
Mm,
anywhere. And we just have these giant mega stores and the way the market trends go is you have to put those stores near a freeway arterial, like an off-ramp,
mhm,
in order to
mm.
be able to get the amount of volume that you need in order to cash flow with that business. And so going back to like the beginning of the conversation, I'm still teaching business principles. It's just applied.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like here in Sweden, because when I hear you talk about that, here in Sweden, they have like, for instance, we have, I don't know if you've been in Sweden
I've never been.
before.
I've never been. I've always wanted to go my whole life. I'm part Swedish. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know how to say anything in Swedish?
Oh no, I don't. But my dad's half Swedish and half Scotch Irish.
I can teach you something really easy. You can say tack.
Tuck.
It means thank you.
Ah, tuck.
It's very easy. And you can also say hey, which means hi,
Oh, I
basically.
love it. I could
That's
run around the whole country going tuck, hi, tuck, hi.
it would work,
Oh,
trust
it would. It
me.
would. My mom did that in Japan when I was a kid. She came back from this trip and she was telling everybody, she said, Arigato gozaimasu. Konnichiwa. Arigato gozaimasu. Konnichiwa. To everybody. And like I'm sitting here listening to her, I'm like, you're saying thank you, hello to everybody, right?
They probably thought she was the nicest person
Oh
ever.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, everybody gets an A for effort when you're visiting a foreign country and you try and use words. So I'm definitely going to remember talk.
No. Well, here in Sweden, going back to what I was saying is that we have some chains markets, if I can call it like that.
Mhm.
You know, like McDonald's, for instance, is like a chain restaurant.
Right.
It's the same with it's the same with like markets. They have this market called Ica, for instance, and we have a lot of Icas here and there around the city, like one in the south of the city, one in the east, west, north. I don't know how it really, but it's scattered everywhere and it's like chains of it. And then there could be like a supermarket, but it's also Ica. I don't know.
Incredibly smart model. So what you're describing is called a hub and spoke model. And so you have
Yeah.
these little spokes around here, and somewhere in the city there's a hub where they do the processing. Maybe they bring in pallet orders, they break it down for the stores, and they coordinate it so that they can have that small footprint everywhere. And so that's what you just
Mhm.
described is basically what we're working to build here in the US and then also elsewhere in the world.
Nice.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a system that really
Yeah.
works, especially when you think about the business side of it. As you said, the small markets that start on their own, they usually fail because of these supermarket
Mhm.
models. But on the other side, if you have a supermarket that owns all of these small markets, yes, I get it. The small common man will not be able to earn as much. But I guess it's better for people to be fed. I don't know.
You can have it all though. So what I'm teaching communities is that you can develop your own market system. So
Mhm.
if you have, like, I live in the Denver area, and if you go all around Denver, and if you go to all the satellite cities, there's 18 cities around Denver, and it's this big, kind of like a big mushroom of collective cities. And all kinds of different neighborhoods you can identify and say, that's a food desert, that's a food desert, that's a food desert, that's a food desert. And so you can get 15, 20, 30 different locations where you could potentially put a store. And so if we have a warehouse someplace that's got a commercial kitchen that does double duty and brings in the logistics and just creates a little pallet and then you send that to the store every week, then you've got that logistics solution. And if
Mhm.
you gear that commercial kitchen in a certain way using certain equipment, you can also use that as a food rescue location. So now you're rescuing prepared meals and backyard produce out of people's backyards. You guys have some systems over in Sweden and Switzerland and Norway where they're using apps where
Mhm.
homeowners are coordinating their backyards with each other, and entire neighborhoods will grow like these guys will grow beets, these guys will grow tomatoes, these guys will grow cucumbers, and then everybody swaps back and forth. We don't really have a lot of systems like that here in the U.S. yet, but these are all things that are successes. They're proven strategies, and so we're bringing these and kind of putting them together into a system that makes sense for our needs.
I think like when you look at it globally, every single country has its own systems that work and its own negative sides and positive sides. I do think that if we do take all the goods from every country, all the positives, it could be the perfect kind of utopian world, sort of.
Yeah, I could. And the thing is, a lot of these systems translate really well across different areas, but it may not be immediately apparent that it translates.
Mhm.
See, how does that connect the dots in my language, in my lived environment in the area? So you guys have a ton of ski resorts around you, I would imagine.
A ton of,
Ski resorts, like for skiing and
yeah, 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 yeah. We do.
so here's a tip from Las Vegas. The food bank out there collaborated with the MGM Grand Resorts, which is the company that makes all the movies in Hollywood. A lot, well, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Oh my God!
They own
Wow.
they own like a third of the strip in Las Vegas, and so they got 20 properties volunteering food waste from their conventions, and they were using this piece of equipment called a blast chiller. And the blast chillers have been around since the 1920s. It's not new technology, but this was the first time that anybody had used it to rescue prepared meals because they can take it from hot hold, ready to serve at a buffet, and immediately drop it down to frozen so they can transport it and get it out to the community. So this is a
Wow.
massive, massive. They just celebrated 5 million meals rescued, and your ski resorts can do the same thing because you've got the buffets, you've got the resort meals, you've got all of the meals that are at the top of the mountain. You can use the same equipment to bring it down the mountain and distribute it through the community.
That's such a great idea. I'm so happy you shared it in my
Yeah,
podcast
me
because
too.
it's also listened to by Swedish people. So
We got to
um,
get it. The what do you call it?
the the word
The
out.
words. We get to get the words in English and Swedish so that everybody can
Yeah,
read it, and we'll have I can't remember the word for
trust me,
it.
every Swedish person speaks English, so that's not gonna be hard. Sometimes my husband, he's Swedish. I am not Swedish, like originally. I'm Albanian, but he's Swedish and he speaks English so good. People think he's American most of the time. I'm like, I swear to God, he's
I
not.
believe it. He probably speaks better English than most of the people in my block.
Oh, no. When you talked about ski resorts, I thought you were gonna talk about, you were gonna ask me if I ski, and I was like, oh no, I don't.
Oh
I
no, no, but
don't.
I think about it all the time because I ski.
You
Yeah,
do?
well, I'm an hour.
Is it one of your hobbies?
Well, Denver, Colorado is only we're the Rocky Mountains is right next to us. We got the Swiss Alps of the United States is right here. Yeah,
Really? Oh my God.
yeah.
Wow. So, because when did you learn to ski?
I started skiing when I was 3 years old.
There you go.
Yeah, I started.
My
Yeah,
mother, when I told her that I wanted to ski when I was young, she told me that um, she was such a protective mama bear that she was like, if you go to ski, uh, you're so young. No, don't do it because you're gonna go and you're gonna break a leg. And she scared me, and I was like, okay, I will not do that. But mom, please, all my friends are going. No, you're gonna break your legs.
Well, at least
So
you
I
get it
never
out of
learned
your
how to
way
ski.
early. I don't know. I'm 53 and I've still not broken a leg, so maybe this year.
Well, that was my mom.
Well, it's never too late. The ski resorts are very forgiving, even if you come in as an adult. So,
I think now I am an adult. I think of consequences way more than I thought of consequences when I was a kid. So now I'm kind of like my mom, I guess.
yeah. I would honestly, I kind of feel that way about snowboarding because I tried learning snowboarding as an adult and you fall over a lot. And I have,
Yeah,
it's not as easy for me to jump back up anymore. So I
yeah.
gave up after a couple of tries, but skiing is
No.
not as hard. You stand up, it's stable. It's pretty,
The thing is, if I take it up, I know that I'm not gonna give up until I actually learn it. But it's so scary looking because it feels so professional. Because I took roller skating once when I was like, oh, this was a long time ago actually, when I was 14,
Mhm.
and I was falling on my back all the time,
Yeah.
but I wasn't giving up at all until I actually was able to roller skate.
Well,
So I think I can do that. But do you have any other hobbies that maybe have led to you being interested in this field, in this area? Or is it just because I saw that you said your approach, which is, I'm going to ask you um, first, maybe if you have any background in biology or any medical field, because you say that you use a certain approach for the food system,
no, my background is in logistics. I'm I'm a
logistics.
supply chain specialist. One of my
Mhm.
jobs in the Army was getting hot meals out to troops in the field. I was in the supply for a while after I got injured in
Oh,
a
right.
parachuting accident in 1995, and so my unit put me
Oh,
into the supply room in order to basically figure out what to do with me until I healed, which I never did heal. I ended up being permanently disabled from the parachuting accident. Uh,
oh my God, what happened? Do you mind if you share it?
Oh, I was so we were in it was the Rhine-Luzon drop zone at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and we were
Mm,
doing a joint exercise with the 82nd Airborne Division down the street. And so it was a plane I wasn't used to, with a parachute I wasn't used to, jumping out of the airplane lower than I was used to, and the wind was like
mm.
35 miles an hour. So when I jumped out, my parachute partially collapsed and I had to reach up with the risers and try and shake air back into it. And as I was reaching out, I got it to fill with air, and just as I got it to fill with air, I hit the ground.
Oh my God, that sounds so painful.
It sucked. So
You were like, I've been through worse. Shut up.
no, that's the worst I've been through. I've been through a couple of motorcycle accidents, a couple other crazy stuff in my life, but that was by far the worst.
And I'm here like, I can't ski. I'm scared of
Oh
skiing.
yes, nothing. At least the snow's a lot softer than concrete.
Wow, Shannon. You're built of concrete, maybe, huh?
I don't know. It
'Cause that sounds like a very near death experience.
Yeah, yeah. I ended up
Sounds so scary.
permanent damage to the spine. I ended up getting a stroke 6 months later. So I'm lucky to be
Oh
alive in a
my
lot of
God.
ways. But
But do you feel better now?
I mean, there's some stuff that never stopped. I've got
Mm,
disability for 30 years now. I've been dealing with it. So a lot of it's just kind of figuring out how to create workarounds. And a lot of the workarounds that I've developed, I've been able to figure out, okay, so how can we do this at the society level? How can we do it this at the community level? And so a lot of
wow, that's very
yeah,
thoughtful.
just kind of figuring out how do we stretch that out and make solutions that don't just help me, but help, my entire community, my block, my neighborhood, my bioregion. I don't know if you know that.
Mm,
A bioregion is everything that a watershed touches. So like a river,
mm,
whole
mm,
system. We're starting to do organizing that's along bioregions because we're recognizing that there's an artificial separation with cities and counties and states and countries where, if you don't flow information where you get agreements between different areas that are in that watershed, a lot of times it doesn't succeed. That was
mm.
a big segue there. So
No, it was really good. I love how you explain it. you go into details. You don't just say like you really want to explain every single word, and I love that. It feels like I'm in a class right now.
Well, a lot of this stuff is new to me. The whole agricultural world is kind of new to me. I'm kind of a city kid. I'm really good. I'm really good at the retail models. I'm really good at urban distribution. I'm really good at kind of field stuff when everything breaks down and you're in a war zone, that kind of thing. But when it comes to farming and rural, like all of the waste to value stuff and everything that's going on out there, I'm just learning, and so I'm really picking up a lot of information just in the last couple of years.
Wow. I mean, for me, it has been a little like that as well because my husband grew up in a farm and I was a very city girl. And like I moved into a small city here in Sweden and I felt like I'm like so depressed. But then like okay, of course it got better, but then it was like it felt even worse when I saw where my husband lived. I was like, "Oh my God, you live in the countryside. I cannot do that." And then I got so used to it because I got to learn so much about that part. But enough about me. I'm just going to ask you that you said in your bio that your approach to all of these methods that you're using and these strategies is shaped by many different domains. And as you mentioned before as well, military logistics, coalition building and army special operations, logistic strategies. You mentioned the nightclubs that you owned.
Mhm.
So you were like a business owner as well. And something else that you mentioned was also regenerative agriculture design integration at hyperlocal to watershed scale, which you also mentioned before.
So leaving
Mhm,
any place better than you found it, leaving any system better than you found it, that's my definition of regeneration. Now you can talk to 20,000 people and get 20,000 definitions of regeneration. It's one of those hotly contested terms that everybody's like, I know it's this and this. But at the basic core, it's can we make things better? Can we improve systems? Can we improve situations? And so what I've done is I've gone through a process where I've really kind of gained a deep understanding of the land regeneration process. And there's folks that have been doing this for 40, 50, 60 years of regenerating
mhm,
degraded land, teaching farmers how to transition to older systems that actually support soil health and biome health. And so you've got this beautiful, beautiful movement, and the problem is that movement doesn't understand the urban side, and they don't understand how to grow new markets, and they don't understand. And so what ends up happening is they'll harvest this amazing food, and they'll have these beautiful practices where they've got agroforestry and silvopasturing and mixing animals with plants and living systems design, really beautiful stuff. And then they hand those harvests off to conventional markets to compete against farmers that aren't doing all of this amazing stuff and having inferior product. And so what I'm doing is really trying to introduce to the farming community, hey, there's this pathway into the city where you can actually grow your own market. And it's all these areas that have been abandoned by supermarkets that people are hungry for the food that you're serving. And that creates that commonality, that creates a conversation across all of these borders and schisms that you see in like the political side.
It feels like you're doing also a little bit of networking around all of this. Like you're putting your social skills at use as well,
Mhm.
um, and making these different connections. But I wanted to know also when which one of all of these approaches was the most successful in achieving your ultimate goal of opening more groceries or making available more grocery stores in rural areas.
Well, we haven't achieved it yet, but the my approach is evolving, and what I'm calling it is the edge runners approach. And so
Mm-hmm.
the theme that kind of runs through my life is that I've spent the majority of my life operating in worlds that systems kind of tend to break down, or there's never any system that in place at all. And so you've got kind of the forgotten people and broken systems and kind of the edge of society. That's where nightclubs exist. That's where a lot of my experience is in, is how do we support those communities. So the
Mm-hmm.
edge runners philosophy that I bring to the table is how do we knit around these cracks, and how do we create systems that make this system and this system talk to each other. And how do we create cross cultural coalitions and stakeholder conventions where we can say, hey, maybe you have your interest and I have my interest, and here's where that Venn diagram overlaps, and this is where we can work together. And we don't have to argue about what we disagree on. We can just focus on what we do agree on, and we can create almost a vendor relationship. I'm talking to folks in cities right now about how farmers can come in, like literally as vendors, to be able to take food waste back out to the countryside, convert it into soil, and then use it on their crops to be able to bring in better food. I'm talking to farmers about how they can come into inner city communities that don't have access to healthy food and literally create a marketplace inside of a dead restaurant space. And here's how you convert the commercial kitchen. Here's how you convert the seating area into a grocery store. And here's how you build the business model. Here's the marketing approach. Here's all the different components that you need. So what I'm doing is distilling 30 plus years of all kinds of weird stuff that I've been in into a cohesive way for any community to really be able to pick up the ball and start being self-sufficient and start developing the capital and the capacity that we all need in order to be able to weather the changes that are coming. Because I mean, frankly, you can look out the window now and changes are coming. Climate chaos
Yeah.
coming. The reality is something that nobody in their right mind is really fighting against. I mean, there's people in their wrong mind that are still arguing, but nobody in their right mind is, shut up. So,
No, no, I totally get what you're saying because actually, as you were talking, you reminded me today. I was going to the mall. I was shopping for something, and then I go past I walk past the street, and I see this truck of like an army truck, and I see like a soldier inside, and he looked so cool, and the truck looked so cool, but because I'm so fascinated by this military stuff.
yeah.
But then I was like, oh no, that's not a good sign. Why am I seeing a military truck in the middle of the city right now? I mean, they're everywhere right now. And it feels like with all the news out there in the world, one day I just felt like maybe I should just delete all my social media because it feels like all the information that I'm getting in, it's sort of making me depressed because sometimes you feel like there's nothing you can do about it more than just talk about it, but the more you talk about it, the more depressed you get.
But
So sometimes you don't know what the solution to all of this is.
yeah, it's tough.
But that leads me actually to a question that I think you would be perfect for it.
Okay.
Um, I'm thinking if there is an apocalypse like situation, or if there's like, I don't know, something like all the wars going on and everything, if that comes to the West, um, what kind of foods should people focus on storing and buying, and what kind of strategies should they develop for their food to last
All
longer?
right. You hit on something that is you may not know the term, but it's a pet peeve of mine. Uh,
Oh, okay, I know the
all right.
term.
So here's what's funny about this. So we have a lot of what we call preppers here in the United States too, and that's people that I mean they're going to dig a bunker and they're going to survive the apocalypse and the nuclear life, and they're going to come up with a gas mask and their rifles like, "Stewie, we own the world now, man." So So I again, growing up here in the Southwest, you're surrounded by it. There's people of every types. You got all the way from the left wing hippies all the way to the right wing preppers. Everybody's doing their thing, and there's a lot of this hyper individualism of how am I going to protect my family when the system collapses?
Guilty.
And here's the sad reality: is if the system collapses, us sitting in suburbia are not going to be, if we dig a hole in our closet and squirrel away some nuts for the winter, that's not going to protect us. That's not going to save us. If and here's the thing: we don't have to wait for the collapse of nuclear annihilation. We don't have to wait for any of that stuff because we can see the breakdown in the global supply chains happening right now. We can see
Mm.
the breakdown from Eastern Europe and the breadbasket supply disruptions of food coming into Europe. We can see in the United States the wildfires and the immigrant roundups and all the crazy stuff that's happening. The global tariff war is affecting fertilizer prices, and farmers are losing, sometimes two-thirds of their crops are sitting rotting in the fields. Like we're seeing it right now. This is
Mm-hmm.
not a theoretical, this is not a hypothetical situation. We need collectively to be more prepared because the global supply chain is breaking down. The agreements that have held firm since the 1940s are starting to erode. And so what we need to start really leaning into is interdependence. Instead of independence, where I'm going to take care of myself and just the people I know personally, we need to start really leaning into how can we as a community build the capacity that allows us to create the localized supply chains that we need when the global supply chains start getting rickety and start getting shaky. And the way to do that isn't as hard as you think. You know, every,
But if everybody is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to forget this question. If everybody is so independent and or so individualistic in their own ways that they only think about themselves, egotistical, I guess is the best word to describe it. How can we build interdependence?
by having a plan. A lot of people are scared and they default to I'm going to take care of mine because I don't have a plan and this is all I can think of. But if you,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if you were to show up down at your local community center or your senior center or your church
Mm-hmm.
that has a commercial kitchen and say, hey, I heard about this piece of equipment that we can install in the church that we can start rescuing meals. Would you be interested? Chances are your church or somebody else, some other church down the street would be like, hell yeah, let's do that. Sorry, heck,
Mm-hmm.
the other word.
Yeah, maybe they wouldn't say hell. I
Yeah,
don't know.
well, so that's the key is you find those organizations that have the resources, share the plan with them, and then get the community together to start volunteering. Because then you find the person that's working at the ski resort and say, "Hey, I know the manager. I know somebody who's a decision maker." You find the people at the hospital down the street and say, "Hey, yeah, when we close the kitchen out, we'll give you whatever we've got." As long as the health department's online and says, "Oh yeah, we've certified that this food is safe temperature and can be repurposed out to the community." So you create that
Mm-hmm.
pathway in that plan. Now everybody's on board. Now the corporations have a stamp of approval from the health department. Now the church has a reason to use their commercial kitchen that's not just, a couple of times a month.
Yes. Yeah.
Even a community center, they may be open every day, but they may close at 6 p.m. But the restaurants close at 11 p.m. or midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got an opportunity for a night shift to come in, volunteers to come in and just start rescuing that food, and then they can freeze it, and then the day shift comes in the next day and they just distribute it out to the community. So that's a really easy way for communities to get involved. And then from there, we can start talking about, well, what does a food hub look like? What does waste to value with the farming community look like? What is these connections? What does the municipal connections look like? But it starts with just talking to your neighbors, talking to the community down the street and saying, hey, we have an opportunity to build something cool. There's some folks doing this
Yeah.
over here, and over here. And somebody gave me a system that I think would make sense. Let's do this thing.
Well, that sounds like the most logical thing to do, but I think the people would argue that maybe it's also like risky to only take that approach. Maybe, for instance, I would argue that it's better to do both. In the long run, that your like community approach is the best one, but also like I would think that it wouldn't work without also doing something for your own self, like supplying yourself as well at the same time as you maybe volunteer for the community. And because people many people are so nice and everything, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are also very selfish.
Even if somebody's selfish, even if somebody doesn't care about you, they don't care about anybody else on the block. Just from a strictly fiscal financial standpoint, it makes sense. It makes more sense to create a single commercial kitchen that's got canning capacity, that's got large
Mm,
scale, capacity to be able to deal with food, to be able to transition food from whole to shelf stable, freeze fryer,
mm,
all this equipment. It makes sense to do this as a revenue producing model. And then if you've got that capacity where let's say 30 or 40 families are taking advantage of this one piece of equipment,
yeah, that would be
yeah, you
awesome.
have to do 10x less labor. You have to do, I mean, basically, it's an economy of scale applied to community need. You can be
Mm-hmm.
selfish all day long, but if you don't personally have to run your own canning situation in your basement because you can go down the street to the community center and there's a canning station there, then that's one less thing that you have to do in order to be self sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Got a freeze dryer that lets you freeze dry food which is good for up to 30 years with no loss of nutrient capacity if it's stored right, which means that you've got a nice vacuum sealer, which means you've got, like the systems are in place. Not everybody can do that, but if you get 40 or 50 families together, now all of a sudden everybody can have the equipment. You have the access. What we're using is kind of what it's called a makerspace approach. Do you know that term?
No, I've never heard about it
Okay,
actually.
so this is exciting. One of the things that's happening in libraries and places all over the United States is these maker spaces are being built, and they'll have 3D printers and CNC routers and just complicated equipment that may cost 30 or
Hmm.
40 or 50 or $100,000 to get, but they'll pool their resources and have access to this incredibly powerful equipment, and then they can do really cool things. Well, I found out that there's some 3D printers that work in titanium and ceramic and other metals that would be really useful for farmers to be able to fabricate parts for their tractors.
Wow.
You could get a large scale makerspace that's got that's kind of got high ceilings that you could use a joist for RVs, for tractors, anything like that. And now all of a sudden you can lift something up and do modifications. So this is a way that you can start thinking about how we can develop a manufacturing capacity at the community level. So they call it a makerspace, and you can literally make
Mhm.
anything inside of it. But what I haven't seen yet is an agricultural scaled makerspace, something that really kind of levels up the equipment to something that's useful for fabrication and manufacturing. And that's what I want
Mhm.
to see at the community level. Because if we can create those capacities and really show communities how it works when you have access to these tools and where you can make those decisions at the community level without having to beg some corporation for permission or the government, nonprofit, or whoever it is, daddy up there that we need to ask for.
Yeah, they don't always show up.
No, sometimes their purposes isn't the same as the community, and sometimes they have their own agenda. And we have to recognize that that's the reality that we live in. And as communities, it is our responsibility to step up and say, hey, it's our time.
It really sounds, I mean, so good. Like preach, basically, because yeah, but it's true because sometimes I also feel like, and not to be like this conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I feel like the government doesn't really care about us. Now I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but sometimes it feels like that. And I actually had an episode with also a former veteran that was talking about that we were talking about different sort of political systems in different states, and we said, but how do we know that they, like for instance in Vietnam, how do we know that they didn't have the right system that actually worked for them, or something like that. Now I'm being very careful because you're a veteran and I don't want to say something wrong, but
Try not to
but
get into
we,
the politics. I really think
no,
the
I really don't
operational
have to.
side, but I mean, what you're saying it's not untrue. You know,
But it just sounds like, are we ever living in a democracy? Because it feels like we give all the power to the government, and then they are so powerful that they make so many decisions that affect us that maybe we don't necessarily agree with.
so we live in, well, I'm in the United States, you're in Sweden, we're in different systems, but by and large, we
Mm-hmm.
live in a representative style of government. And that
Mm-hmm.
style of government exists at multiple levels. So,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us, and I'm right there with you. I feel helpless when I see some of the stuff that's happening at the federal level. Some of the stuff at the
Mm-hmm.
international level seems absolutely insane to me, and there's nothing that I can do about that. But what I can do is I can
Yeah.
support my community where I live, and I can help
Yeah.
us to understand how we can be self-secure and how we can be resilient in the face of these changes so that we at least have the tools and the understanding about how do we navigate this path together. And,
Mm-hmm.
and in this situation, I'm here in Eastern Colorado, and I got to be tell you, it's not been an easy conversation because there's industries that are involved that are very, adamant about no, we like our status quo, we like our system the way it is, and we don't appreciate coming in and suggesting changes. So a lot of what
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing is really reaching out to other systems, other folks outside the U.S. and saying, listen, here's some stuff that's been proven. Here's what we know, and here's the systems that we can develop now, and here's how I think it would work in your area and in your community. So a lot of this cross pollination. I mean, I'm working on a program in Africa right now with a
Wow.
yeah, a small village in Kenya is developing a water security and food security initiative that's around aquaponics, which is fish and produce on top of each other and they're grown. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
a 3 football field size sediment pond to create aquaponics system and then put a reverse osmosis filtration system at the back end of that. And so it's going to create water security, food security, and the beginning of a complete market system for that entire village that they're going to grow into processing and get a couple of trucks and get energy production and really just start bootstrapping their entire economy based on the just based on the information that I shared with them about how to use a card reader system.
Wow, wow. How did you get into that?
I was in a random Zoom call 3 months ago, and I'm listening to this guy, Walter, talk about his village and talk about the challenges they're dealing with. And they're trying to laboriously, dig boreholes to get down 1,000 feet to get where clean water is. And they're right next to the second largest freshwater lake in the world. And
Wow.
so I used to live in Mexico during COVID.
Mhm.
And so when I was down there, my landlord was telling me about how the colonias in that area were fixing their water insecurity problem just by putting an RO system, a reverse osmosis filtration system, right where the water
Mm,
comes into their neighborhood. And so they were able to
mhm.
clean the water there and then just replace the lead pipes downstream from that. And they didn't have to worry about any of the dysfunction in the rest of the city. And so I shared that with these guys, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's the same. Yeah, like oh my God, we could totally do that." Then
Yeah,
their engineers got involved and they started expanding and they're like, oh my God, we could do this. And then I told them about an ice machine. I'm like, if you have an ice machine, then you can send fish home in cold storage. And they were like, oh my God. And so we've been
that's
ideas
crazy.
back and forth, but this is literally like 3 or 4 different solutions from around the world that I've just been observing for the last decade. And it's like, this is how this can work. And this is how it works here. This is how this works here.
Have you always thought like this and like you just absorbed information and you created all these patterns and then you are able to like make a sort of a system in your mind?
Pretty much, yeah. I connect dots and I'm able to find pathways in ways that a lot of people don't see. I'm neurodivergent. I just yeah, I've always
That
been able to
sounds,
check patterns, and so I can see.
you could be a detective,
Oh, that would be boring though.
but you could solve a lot of cases.
Oh, I so much rather work with food and farmers and healthy people doing cool stuff. Like I want to stay as far away from detectiving as I possibly can.
Or find the
Do
cure
it.
to cancer.
Yeah,
Something like that. I mean,
probably
I
could.
think it's so beautiful when you can connect all like the patterns. I listen to these true crime podcasts. I know you don't want to be a detective, but sometimes when I listen to these podcasts, I just hear so many stories that I just am trying to to listen to every single detail so that I solve the case or see myself how who is right and who is wrong and if that person is guilty or not, and then in the end I just see what the jury has said, and then sometimes I'm wrong and sometimes I'm
Oh,
right.
that's cool. Yeah.
i feel like I feel like it's such a cool thing to do.
I wish we
uh,
wish more people would do it in our food system. Like we have this prevalent attitude that the experts in charge know everything there is to know, and they're doing all the right
mm,
things, and it's like this is not our problem. And the reality of the
mm,
food system that affects everyone, even if you're not if you happen to be one of the people that's not food insecure, maybe you have enough money, maybe you live upstairs from a grocery store, maybe you're the luckiest person in the world, maybe you own a grocery store. I don't know.
yeah,
Down
yeah,
the street is struggling, and we have the ability to connect these dots. We have the ability to create systems that make it to where nobody loses. We build new markets that actually allow us to pay for the capacity that we need in order to be food secure. I mean, these systems, I don't know, it just makes so much sense to me that a lot of times I'm just kicking the wall or, why isn't this working?
it's also because you're so passionate about it. But if somebody else wanted to follow your path, um, what would you advise them to do first?
Read my book.
Oh, you have a
I have a
book.
book. Yeah, I wrote a book. Matter of fact, I published it last year. It's my third book. I'm working on my fourth one right now. It's called The Edge Runner's Guide to Unconventional
Wow.
Food Systems. But this book is called The Food System Revolution, and it's available globally.
Is it on
It's on
Amazon?
Amazon, and you can actually also download it free on my website. So it's just a PDF.
Really?
It's not formed up like a book. You don't get the cool chapters and anything like that. But if you just want to get access to the information, it's
No, I'd rather have the
you
paper.
got it. It's
Uh,
livingsys.org. So livingsys, which is short for systems, .org.
But also it's like so much nicer to read it when you're just like sitting in the couch under the blanket. It's yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna read it
You're right,
anyways
absolutely.
because
And yeah, I put it up. So I mean, we put it on Amazon because Amazon's a great system for everybody has access to it.
yeah, I always buy my books
Yeah,
there.
but honestly, I don't care if anybody pays for it. Like, I would love a review. That would be awesome. But I don't care. I'm just trying to get this information out. So if everybody downloads it on my website,
That's so
it,
beautiful.
we also have a membership option there. You can join the community, get the newsletter. I put writings out regularly on LinkedIn, so you can always find me on LinkedIn, Shannon Dobs, and you can
Mm,
check out some of the articles that I write. That's also all on the blog page. I mean, it's a conversation that more and more people are having. Um, but it's
mhm,
also a conversation that a lot of sectors like climate scientists and academics and advocates and activists
mhm.
need to step out of their silos and understand that there's solutions right outside the part that they're willing to look at.
I mean, the thing is, when you were talking about all of this, it just made me feel like, am I maybe too comfortable in my own life that I don't think about, now this is awkward to say, but that I don't think about other people's how do they get food or anything like that. Sometimes when you don't see it every day or when you don't hear about it every day, then you just sort of like forget about it. And when you are talking about it right now, it just makes me feel like maybe I should learn more so that I could also be of help. And I feel like reading this book would be a good start.
I hope so. I mean, it's only, 140 pages. It's not a long read. I made it really small just to kind of put the essence in there. And the goal
Mm-hmm.
is that once you read the book, you've got a basic understanding of three really powerful strategies that we're putting together into a system. And you can really get a better understanding of how the food system actually works, kind of on the back end, behind, under the hood, if you will.
How did it feel when you were writing this book? Was it a long process for you because you wanted it to be perfect? I see you're very detailed in your
Oh
approach.
no, it was pure chaos, and I loved every minute of it. So
Really?
I don't know how into AI you are, but I have been
Oh, I am.
deeply
I asked
diving into AI for
ChatGPT
the last
about
couple of years. Yeah, so
everything.
I was an early adopter, and my second book that I wrote was AI written, and it was horrible, and it was absolute crap. And so I took my first book that I wrote myself and my second book that I wrote with AI, and I scrunched them together into the back end. And I asked Claude to help me write the third book. And so it's a synthesis of everything I've ever written up until that point. And I think it's
Oh,
awesome. And and the whole point of it is to make it really thin and really easy to digest. And so I distilled everything
yes.
into just the very minimum people need to get a basic understanding. And I love it. I mean,
Hmm.
and so I mean, I'm using now. Like I said, I'm working on my fourth book, which is going to be kind of a capstone that each other book will fit into as basically explaining a part of the food system. But I
Hmm.
mean, I'm writing grants now using source materials. I'm getting involved with Notebook LM and other free Google tools that I'm actually sharing with community groups around the world that's giving them the capacity of being able to take control of their own messaging. So some of the stuff
Hmm.
that we're learning about with AI is actually democratizing access to tools that community groups need in order to be able to get the support that they need to do the things that I'm doing.
Hmm.
And so it gets kind of meta because you're like, we're talking about how we're talking about things, but these tools are.
No, I really appreciate it actually. Um, I just wanted to also ask you about your business owner lifestyle. You said that you had nightclubs that you owned. Why exactly nightclubs? You said it was a dream of yours as well. Was it because maybe you just wanted to be a very successful businessman in that area, or was it because you loved clubbing?
Well, I was in the army and I got involved with the goth industrial nightclub scene with like the punk scene and all of the back in the day in the early 90s.
Oh, like the
Yeah,
music
and I got into
part.
raves. I was going to warehouse parties in Winston-Salem and all over the state, and I just fell in love with the scene. And I
No,
decided, like,
that's so
yeah,
cool.
and so after, when I got out of the army, I was disabled. I couldn't do the military thing anymore, and I was struggling to figure out what I was doing with my life at that point. And it just seemed like it made a lot of sense with me. It was like, let's go, let's go dive into the music industry and let's figure this out. Because I had been writing plans and ideas for nightclubs on the back of napkins on a Saturday night, like at the clubs. I'm sitting here, I'm obsessing about it. I'm watching the DJs and how they're crashing the floor so they can send people to the bar. And I'm like, this is science. I love this. So every part of it just it appeals to me. And so I got into it to understand how that system worked and how I could find my place in that system. And ultimately that ended up turning into business ownership, but I had no idea when I started that journey that that's where I would be. That's where I would end up. And even then, I
Mm.
when I went up to Reno initially, I was going to be a college student. I was helping out my wife with her place, and we ended up divorcing 4 years into the business ownership, and she had gotten disabled even worse than me. And so she told me,
Oh,
you need to either take this bar or I'm going to have to shut it down. And so I ended up taking on that responsibility, and it was hard because with my disabilities, it was a struggle. I couldn't run a shift. I couldn't, I
mm.
had to hire somebody to do the books and the back end stuff and everything like that. And so I really trained the staff from the very beginning. I was like, listen, guys, we're all in the same boat here, and this boat's going to sink or it's going to swim based on what we do here. And so I
Yeah.
everybody to be their own manager. I really leaned into the community element and really made everybody understand what this location meant to everybody in the community. And it's never really been business first for me.
No,
No,
it doesn't sound like that when you talk about everything else we've talked about until now. It sounds like you were so much more of a. Sorry, I'm just gonna fix the lighting here.
that too.
It's very dark in here.
You got this,
I'm.
you got this little toy behind me on the wall. It's the only light in the room.
My lighter switched off, so I'm using the computer right now.
That's a bit much for me. Can't quite handle that. All right. 80% of the way through the podcast. Oh, let's fix the lighting.
Well, it's very authentic. What can we do?
Absolutely.
When I listen to you talk about all the different topics we talked about tonight, um, or today for you,
We just
it's
figured it out.
it feels like you really care about not just about yourself, but about the community, making the community a better place, bettering the society, and developing the society, which is also what this podcast stands for. So, um, yeah, I don't think you would have any selfish reasons.
Oh, no, you'd be absolutely wrong. Everything I'm doing is 100% selfish. So at the end of the day,
Oh,
yeah, when we build this whole system and we get the farmers connected with the cities and we get the cafe components and we get the commercial kitchen and we get all of these things, all of it is just so that I can go down the road and get a free meal.
okay.
I'm kidding.
I was wrong, I guess. But
In all seriousness, though, everything that I've been developing is based on my understanding of my own disability needs and saying, hey,
yeah, of how it's going to benefit you in the
exactly. It's
end.
how I struggle in the kitchen with self-care. Because of my head injury, I walk away from food in the middle of cooking. I forget steps. I ruin food all.
Mm.
And so what I've been thinking of all of these years is how can I create a system that would serve me and that would take care of my needs as a disabled person that's big enough that we can handle a professional staff so that I don't have to be driving it. And so everything,
Do you
that's how we got to the scale that we got, which is the bioregional level, is this is the level that we can actually have professional staff, that we can actually have people that are running this without any of us having to do that. We can actually afford to pay for the staff that's necessary in order to run that system.
do you ever like no, I don't know, you don't have to answer this, but do you ever get help from any family members or something when it comes to your disability, and how does it affect your life? How has it affected your life then, and how does it affect it now that you have lived with it? I don't know for how long.
Well, I was injured in the service, and so I get the lifetime free medical, and I get paid every month, and so my bills are taken care of, and so I can afford the time to volunteer to do these.
Mm,
So
that's
yeah,
amazing.
the healthcare. I mean, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination in the same situation as most Americans in that way. Just because of kind of the way everything went down, I'm kind of taken care of. I like to call it the Army's "you break me, you buy me" policy.
Well, I mean, I've heard also a lot of people get in the army uh, to pay their bills, but also a lot of people get in the army because they really are patriots and they just want to do something for their country. They want to serve their country. But at the same time, I do feel like if the army is such a, because I'm not a soldier, but if the army is such a hard place and tough place, then they should have the responsibility of serving you when you need them because you
Yeah.
are serving them. So it does feel fair to me at least.
Yeah, we get pretty well taken care of on the medical side, at least if you qualify. I think after a couple of years, a lot of troops end up dropping off of the system. But if you've been injured in the line of duty, then it's a different situation. But what I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
see the military do a lot more of is helping soldiers to understand, and airmen's and Navy and everybody to understand how to better transition into civilian life. You know,
Yes.
almost everything that we go through when we're out processing from the military is like how to get a job and how to
Mm-hmm.
slot yourself into the workforce. And there's really no like self-care. I mean, we spend the entire time in the military. Somebody tells us how to dress. Somebody tells us what to eat. Somebody tells us where to sleep. We make no decisions about life and self-care unless you're married, unless you got kids. Most of us just we walk out of the military as dumb as we were when we walked in about the things that matter.
I don't think so, but
I mean,
I get what you're saying.
yeah, I'm a lot smarter in, certain avenues of weird stuff that doesn't really translate in the civilian world. But when I got out at 27 years old, I was dumb as a stump. I didn't know how to cook my own meals. I didn't even know I was supposed to wash the dishes. I was watching like stuff grow on them. I mean, it was crazy. And I ended up developing,
Really? You didn't know how to wash the
I didn't know
dishes?
anything. I was like, I'd been in a dining facility my entire adult life.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I'd never been in a kitchen. I'd never made my own meals. And so that kind of drove me into bad habits. I was driving cabs, taxis in Vegas for 5 years, and I thought nothing of it. I'd get the big double, burger or the burrito or something, and the big, giant shake or whatever, and I'd go about my business on my 12-hour shift. And over the years, that caused so much damage for me that it took me
Mm.
a heroic effort to try and get my health back. At one point about 12 years ago, my doctor at the VA hospital looked me dead in the face and said, "Listen, son, you need to either figure your stuff out or get your affairs in order because you're 1 foot in the grave."
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I was almost 100 pounds heavier. I had fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, like all kinds of stuff that I was dealing with.
Oh,
And it was because of my diet, and it was because of the sedentary being
yeah.
around alcohol and just all of the kind of things that were going on with the lifestyle it was in. And so I made a decision back in 2013, 2014 that I'm like, I'm going to change this. I'm not going to go out like this. And so I figured it
Mm.
out. It was hard. It was a hard.
How did you get that motivation to change your lifestyle? Because a lot of people say, I'm going to do this, but tomorrow, 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 and tomorrow never comes. How did you do it?
I paid somebody $400 for a 6-week course that was like a boot camp, and I let
Hmm.
them kick my butt. And
So
I
it
ate
was really a
fried
boot
chicken
camp.
breast, and I just had a it was gross, and I hated it, and I was dousing everything with hot sauce, and it sucked. It was not fun for me.
That's
It was. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it.
But look at where it got you
Yeah, that was
now.
my first 30 pounds. So 6 weeks, I'm dropping 30 pounds. I'm like, this is, I felt like I had traction. And so I kept it going, and I kept a healthy diet, and I kept, and I just figured it out. And it took me about a year to come around to the point where I'm happy with where I'm at. And that's when I started looking around and realizing that some of my friends didn't have the advantages I had. Some didn't have a car, some didn't have teeth, some didn't have a functional kitchen, some didn't know what they were doing. And they just never, like me, they'd never cooked before. And some people were afraid of food. I talked to a 65-year-old guy one time who was terrified of food because everybody had always told him that if you make it wrong, you make yourself sick. And he just decided
Oh
I'm
my
gonna let the
God.
pros handle it. And so he went to restaurants every single day. And so
Oh,
he had cholesterol and diabetes, and he was dealing with all kinds of stuff. And that was one of the focus group members that I met in Reno when we were putting together the situation of like how do we solve these challenges.
mm,
It's just, there's so many different reasons why people are food insecure. There's so many different reasons why people have a poor relationship with food. And a lot, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know if you've ever heard, but like some urban kids in America don't even know where food comes from. They think it comes from the supermarket, and they have no understanding of like where the farm is or even where how our food is grown. And so that's
Wow,
a
really?
scary thing. Yeah, yeah. And our educational system is state by state, and a lot of the states really lean into
That's
making.
crazy. Wow, okay, but they do have the internet, don't they?
So here's the thing about the internet, though. The internet's it's a two-edged sword because all of the information in the world is out there, but you have to know how to search for it. You have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's
If you
true.
don't know what you're looking for, there's a lot of bad advice. One of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons we started up this is important too. We started up a new nonprofit organization. We actually just got our 501c3 designation, which is the IRS tax designation that nonprofits get here in the United States. We just got it weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago, but it's the Regenerative Impact Alliance. The website is ria.earth, and that
Mm-hmm.
organization is focused on teaching nonprofits and teaching impact professionals how to 10x their performance and be able to get their outreach to the community, be able to connect with communities, and really sharing the tools and the strategies that we've been learning as impact professionals and how to amplify our own message. So that's a huge resource that we're developing now, and we're inviting people to come in and grow this and co-create this with us. This is literally professionals working with professionals to ideate solutions that help all of us.
What do you say about these chemicals that are allowed in the US in the food, I mean, industry, but not in Europe? For instance, there are many chemicals that are allowed in the US to be used in the food, and I've heard that they say all the time. I've heard a lot of Americans say that they're poisoning us through the food and everything. I don't know if that was the conspiracy side of internet that I got on, but I've heard also from more maybe eligible people that yes, US has more chemical toxins in their food than Europe
You want to
does.
hear
How do you feel about
you
that?
want to hear my favorite conspiracy theory?
Yes.
My favorite conspiracy theory, and this may be true, is that the CIA invented the word and the term conspiracy theory in order to disqualify and debunk people that were talking about things they didn't want to talk about.
Oh, okay. This sounding like some MK Ultra shit.
And
Oops.
the reality is that yeah, you're right. No, what you're hearing is 100% correct. We have chemicals that were designed for killing weeds and killing pests that are sprayed onto our crops, and those same things are those were developed during the war during the 1940s in the war, and so we have
Mm-hmm.
chemicals that are getting into our food, and we're just now finding out how incredibly damaging they are at the genetic level. and
Mm-hmm.
and here in the United States, we don't have a lot of protections from them. So what's happened is we have two different food systems here in the United States. We have organic and we have regular. And if you afford
Mm-hmm.
organic, then you get organic because you want to stay away from the pesticides. You want to protect your kid.
Yeah.
You want to take care of your family. And if you can't afford it, if you're everybody else, then you eat whatever's on the table. And whatever's on the table
Yes.
is, it's increasingly, it's not healthy, and a lot of it can harm you over time. And a lot of it's hidden in the foods, and a lot of it's ultra processed. And we have a very sick system. And the worst part about it for me is that the type of food that is shelf stable, that lasts 30 years, that a bug wouldn't eat, that didn't get sold in a grocery store that week, is the type of food that ends up in poor communities.
Mm.
That's the type of food that ends up lasting long enough to get to the poor communities.
I'm sorry, but all that keeps playing on my head when you're saying that is Michael Jackson's song, They Don't Care About Us. I don't know if you've ever heard
Right? No,
it. You're a
I'm very
music
familiar with
fan.
it. Yeah, and he's speaking from the perspective of an underserved and marginalized community that has
Mm,
the center of prosecution in America since in the
mm,
war.
mm.
And you know, there are people that do care about other people in the United States, but a lot of them are not in positions of control.
I'm talking more about the positions of people who are in power,
Yeah,
about the people who are not in
yeah.
power.
A
But
lot of people that are in power, the only thing they care about is power.
yeah, money.
Yeah. And unfortunately, here in the United States, money has now become uh,
A real
citizenship and
issue.
votes and direct powers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because of the disastrous Citizens
Citizenship.
United decision, this is what, over a decade now. Money in politics is now, basically bribery is now legal in the United States.
It has always been, though, when you look at it in a way. There's always been some sort of corruption, even like in the smallest things. But when you hear about corruption in the West, it feels a little more like how, because it feels like we're not to be that way, but we're not like third world countries who maybe don't have the capacity of developing a system that actually works in the favor of people. But it doesn't feel like we're there yet either.
Well, I mean, if you look at it a certain way, yeah, there's always been corruption, but the thing that separates a banana republic, like a real corrupt place, from a democracy, from something that functions, is
Mm,
respect for the rule of law. And
exactly.
what we've got going on here in the United States right now is that there is a fundamental attack on our Constitution, on our legal protections, on our courts. So we're moving into a situation where the legitimacy of our government itself is being called into question by one of the political parties. and
Mm,
and that is a uniquely dangerous place to be in. And this is very different
mhm,
from what people would consider normal corruption, because with what you would consider normal corruption, there's always a fig leaf of what we're doing is legal or what we're doing is above board or something like that. And what's happening now is blatant illegality and saying the
mm,
laws don't matter to me.
mm.
That's
But
the banana republic thing comes in, because when a leader says the laws are whatever I say they are.
that's a problem. Yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah.
you. But isn't the government also shut down right now in the
The federal
US?
government is.
The federal government.
Yeah, so this is something a lot of people don't really understand about the United States. We're a bicameral republic, and so we've got equal power in many situations between the state and the federal government. The federal government is
Mm,
responsible for certain things. They're responsible for international development, a lot of other, taxation at
mm,
certain
mm, mm.
levels, but the state has sovereignty on a lot of different things. And so our agricultural systems are not dependent on our federal decisions. Like,
Okay, good.
our state
Because that was,
California just passed a law that ICE agents aren't allowed to wear masks, or they're getting ready to pass a law for that. So what's happening right now is that states are reasserting their sovereignty, and so we're starting to get a very different type of conversation going, where there's been this assumption that the federal government is on top, but it's not. It's actually a co-equal branch of government with the states. And
so, but they do threaten a lot with cutting federal funds, if I have it correct.
oh yeah, and
Pardon me.
Maine just said if you cut federal funds, we're going to stop sending taxes up. Now what?
Yes,
The
it
federal
feels like
government, yeah,
a civil
yeah, the
war
federal government exists at the
almost.
pleasure of the state governments. We all work together. It's a bicameral system.
Yeah, it should be like a
Yeah,
symbiosis.
the states control. Matter of fact, the states have laws that allow them to remove federal bad actors. We haven't
Mm,
coordinate and come together to enact those laws, but they exist. And so when we get our shit together and we actually start really pushing back, like that's when things change. And in the meantime, and this is something that's really important for people that are tuning in from around the world,
mm,
the fact that our federal government is doing what it's doing, and the fact that we're in the situation that we're in, does not mean that we can't have conversations with individual people like me here in the United States that are doing things at our level. I'm working with local communities. I'm working with regional communities. I'm working to create coalitions around the states and between states. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing does not require federal input. It doesn't require
mm,
changing any laws. It doesn't require federal funding. And so they're just not part of this discussion. We're operating in local and regional ordinances and the laws that exist at the state and below level. And so, we can have discussions about how we can come together across international boundaries. And I can talk to folks in Sweden I don't have to go through anybody. There's like it's on a
No,
podcast.
no,
Yeah,
definitely the voice isn't. You always have the
yeah.
voice, and that's the most important thing, and you can share it with a lot of people around the world, and who knows how many people will listen to this episode, for instance, and hear your ideas. I had a lovely time talking to you. You were funny, smart, and everything.
Well, you were an amazing
I
interview.
guess.
This was an awesome podcast. I really appreciate taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much. But I think you also are very um, intelligent, if I can say that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, since we got a little bit into the politics, two questions around it. Do you think we are on, because according to what I'm seeing happening around the world, do you think we are in the brink of Great Depression being repeated again and the stock market crashing? Or is that um
We're in something different. So the Great Depression was primarily a financial crash that happened because of a certain number of things that happened leading up to that. What we're
mm,
dealing with right now is something fundamentally different from the 1920s because what's happening right now is, I mean, well, there's two things happening right now. One, there's a global trade war that's creating an unprecedented
mm,
amount of pressure on the global supply chain. So that's intentional, just
mm,
shaking the system and seeing what breaks.
yeah,
And then the other thing is advancing climate change is creating fundamental shifts in the foundation that we make our assumptions on for how business works. And
mm-hmm,
so there's entire areas of the Southwest US that might become uninsurable going forward.
mm,
And if insurance won't underwrite a business, then you can't have a business. If insurance won't underwrite housing, you can't really have housing. So
no,
there's fundamental assumptions at the
it's
foundation.
even worse. It feels like
What's that?
it's even worse than the Great Depression
Well, yeah.
in a way. If it's shaking all the fundamental systems and basically every single system, it to me still sounds like Great Depression.
Well, yeah, but at least in the Great Depression, I don't know. It's like I said, it's fundamentally different. I think it's different because the potential outcomes aren't the same. You know, depression,
No,
you have certain things that there's recovery, there's possibilities, this and that. We're not going to get colder. We're
no,
getting shifts in where plants are able to survive. We're getting shifts where
mm,
bugs are able to survive.
that's
We're getting
amazing.
shifts in where bacteria are able to survive and ticks and other things that are, fundamentally dangerous to us and to human life. And those things, like these are things that we need to consider is because the 1920s Great Depression was a financial breakdown. This is an ecological and financial breakdown.
But don't you think that the climate change issue has gotten at least a little bit better because the ozone layer has started to close and therefore,
No,
uh,
no, no, no,
no?
no, no, no. The ozone layer was in the 1980s, and they fixed that problem. And we were able to come together as a
Hmm.
planet and fix that problem of the hole in the ozone layer. It doesn't exist anymore. What's happening
I thought
now?
I,
No, what's happening now is fundamentally different, and it's bigger because the acidification of the oceans, the warming changing the way that the ocean currents work, the way the atmospheric currents work. I mean, we're seeing seismological shifts in the way our planet works, like the
hmm,
whole planet. And then we don't even know the cascading situations that's going on with the melting ice as that warms up the water, as that raises I mean, there's so much like the salt in the ocean. When more fresh water enters it from melting icebergs, the changing of the salt content actually affects all of the protozoa and all the plankton and every level of life in the sea.
I can only imagine,
So
but
it's if anything bigger than we think it is. And David Suzuki just went up last month and was saying it's too late to even think about
oh
trying to
my gosh,
reverse damage. David Suzuki is one of the most tireless climate advocates that's ever existed. He's considered the leader of the movement in climate change, and he's saying it is too late for us to hope to be able to shift course to correct what's going on. We cannot fundamentally do it with the system the way that it is. So we have to look to our local communities. We have to look to our regional areas, and we have to look to how we can create resilience on the ground Now, the cool thing is, and I don't want to make this all apocalyptic, because if we're able to do that, if we're able to reach our
Mm.
focus to community resilience and then replicate those strategies around the world, we can push back against climate change. We still have hope for changing things, but we need to shift from this policy down approach that we've been doing for the last 30 years. We've been fighting this fight up at the 50,000 foot level of we need to change energy and we don't want to change energy and all this other stuff. And the cool thing is the agricultural community is really out of this fight. So now we have an
Yeah.
opportunity to shift completely and focus our attention on the climate system, on the agricultural system, and we can actually make some really big changes.
What about if 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 everybody in the world were to ask you and you had to make a law basically about climate change, something that people can or can't do, what would the law be according to you?
Well, I mean, it's not enforceable, which is why I don't really lean into laws. Like you can't policy your way out of this problem. That's you can't pass a law
Mm.
because okay, I'll give you an example. Here in Colorado, we just passed a law last year and it's going into effect in the beginning of this next year that says that corporations who are over $500,000 a year are required to pay for their own waste stream. And
Oh,
that's all the way
okay.
across the board. So everything from McDonald's all the way to, you name it, is going to have to pay if you want to continue to do business here in the state. The problem is the state doesn't have the mechanisms to be able to back that law up. So when the corporation is saying, what's the plan? What's the strategy for us to be able to get our waste streams? The state's going, I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're ignoring a lot of proven strategies, like we can't even have a conversation about how to fix the problem that we've created because of this law. So it's at the end of the day, it's just not a lot. It's not about laws. It's about how we can align the markets to be regenerative and to value resources that corporations right now consider waste and how to get the resources
Mm-hmm.
to where they are valued. And a lot of that has to do with the conversion process. A lot of it has to do with taking end of life food and turning it into something else so that we can reinsert it back into the market. It's no longer, shitty 5-day old bananas. Now it's banana bread.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, I mean, you can make the juice out of it. You can make, freeze dried.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, here's something I learned, I don't know, 30 years ago, long, long time ago. I was watching this show, Good Eats by Alton Brown, and he was like a science guy for kids, and he was doing this kind of thing. It was a great show. But there was one episode where he was explaining how when you cook food, with
Mm-hmm.
it undergoes a chemical transformation where the food becomes a different food.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I know. I think I've heard something about this in chemistry class or
So
something.
you could take the food that's on the very last day and like tomorrow it's going to be bad food and you can't eat it anymore. But if you cook that food today, it is now the new food and it starts the time all over again.
Yeah, yeah. And also, if you think about it, if you freeze it, it also could last even longer. Like, I don't know, because I'm not so good at chemistry,
Yeah.
so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Still figuring it
But
out too. So you can freeze it and you can freeze food, especially with the blast chiller, because it freezes it with very, very small water crystals. So you can freeze food
mm,
and you can make it last a long time. Nobody really knows how long you can freeze food for because when you unfreeze it, you can still cook it and eat it and it's not going to make you sick. But there's
mm,
technology called
can you freeze it for very, very long?
you can, but here's the problem. That freezing takes energy. And so the longer
Mm-hmm.
you freeze it for, the more energy it's going to take to keep it at that state. Other way
Mm.
you can preserve food is you can freeze dry it. And freeze drying it just takes all the liquid out of the food. So
How does that work?
so they have this equipment called freeze dryers. It works the same way as your refrigerator. So it just transfers cold from one side to the other, and it removes water from the chamber and takes it out of the chamber. And so anything in that chamber, all of the water comes out of it. And so if you have freeze dried anything, you can freeze dry ice cream, fruit, vegetables, meat. I don't care what you throw in.
But does it have the same nutrients or it
Same
does?
nutrient value, and it'll store for up to 25 years with no loss of nutrient capacity. Now the equipment's,
Wow.
but you can do like chocolatier, you can do entrepreneurism with it. There's all kinds of specialty applications for freeze drying, and you can make camp meals that you can just add water to and cook, and you can eat them, and they don't require refrigeration. So if you're again living in a situation where maybe all you have is a little bar fridge, you're in a motel with your kids, and you just escaped an abusive relationship, and you're in a messed up situation, and you have nothing, but you have this food that you can add water to, and you can cook, and you can feed your family healthy
Mm.
food. That's the type of stuff that we can do with rescued food now. And we can take entire meals and we can freeze dry it and then put it back into.
I think we just found a solution to, or one of the solutions to an
Yeah,
apocalyptic.
oh yeah, it is. So you know Bill Gates?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
So last year, Bill Gates was on like a 45-minute interview, and he was talking about how basically he was basically saying, hey, we're running up against a crisis where we're going to run out of energy globally. And he said
Mm,
he says like one of five miracles has to happen. And he started listing off the things that we have to do in order to be able to get a breakthrough, scientific breakthrough that will allow us to
mm,
keep up with the energy usage around the world. And one of the
mm,
things that we can do to reduce energy usage globally is to reduce the load on aging refrigeration systems. So in transport and storage, the old refrigeration systems, the energy usage is outrageous. And all of that energy used to move food, if we put freeze dryers where the food is being produced and then just freeze dry the food, you can ship it. It takes less weight, it takes less volume. You could even, chop it up. You can pre-prep it, put it all so
mm.
it's ready to serve. And then you can get it to wherever it's going and then just throw it in a pot of water and boil it.
And there's nothing dangerous about this
Yeah.
process.
So the
Sounds so good. Why don't we all have just freeze
because the
dryers?
equipment's expensive, and again, you need to get a bunch of people
Mm.
together to afford the equipment, and then you do it as a community. That's why that works.
Yeah, that's a good solution.
Yeah, freeze dryers are great. They have heat pump dehydrators too. So there's a bunch of different ways that technology can take care of food. But at the end of the day, if you take water out of food, there's nothing for bacteria to grow on. They can't eat the food without water.
No, no.
That's
That
great.
that that sounds like a perfect solution. I had a lovely time talking to you, Shannon. I just want you to leave a message, maybe if you want to, for the audience. You talked a lot about resilience and or at least that's what I got from our conversation on how you went from the army, getting a disability from the army, and then turning that into something as beautiful as helping the community and also helping yourself in turn. Um, from helping the community. And I really loved our conversation. So I would look forward to meeting you again after reading your book, so that we could discuss more about your book. And in the meantime, yeah, the floor is yours for a message if you have any.
I do. The big thing that I want people to understand is that we are not faced with a food shortage situation. What we're faced with is a coordination challenge. Corporations don't have any
Mm-hmm.
way to get their byproducts and their food resources at the end of the day, at the end of the shift, at the end of the process to where it can be used. And so what we need to do as a society is really put in the systems on the back end that can facilitate the corporate waste flows, the government waste flows, all of the different sources of where food is being thrown away and ending up in landfills, we can get it diverted back into communities. There's specific technologies that have been proven around the world. We have all of the situations that we need on the table. All we need is to coordinate and to understand that we have a lot more power than we think we do.
That was a lovely message. I'm definitely going to follow that message by reading your book. And I think that you maybe should share it again with the audience so that they maybe also want to read your book and follow that by listening to our next episode. If you're willing to have another episode together
Absolutely.
about your book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, please do read The Food System Revolution. It is on my website at livingsys.org. That's SYS, not sister. And then you can find it on Amazon if you want to get the audiobook or the paperback. If you come into Denver area, look me up and I'll sign a copy of it and we can, grab some coffee and talk about how we can fix our broken food system together.
Never been to the United States. Would love to actually. Yeah, right now I'm having some problems with my documents. I'm waiting for because Originally, I'm not Swedish, so I'm waiting for my documents to be released, and they take such a long time.
Yeah. Well, when you do, just plan on coming out here in the summer, so we don't have to try and drag you into the ski slopes. We got plenty of paddleboarding, hiking, all kinds of good stuff to do.
Maybe if you guys peer pressure me, I'll be able to ski.
Oh, do it, do it. I'll show you some cool spots. A lot of fun.
Good, good.
Awesome. All right, it's such a pleasure.
It's lovely, Shannon. And thank you so much for this conversation. And I hope you have a lovely day. And yeah, make sure people to read Shannon's book and please follow us. And we'll see each other on our next episode. And in the meantime, go watch our latest episode, and there's going to be many more episodes coming right now. I'm fully working every day, having new guests, but we thank Shannon so much for his presence and this lovely conversation. Thank you,
Thank you,
Shannon.
Mina.
Have a lovely day.